Picture this. June 6, 1944. Omaha Beach. Chaos everywhere. Explosions. Gunfire. Men running for cover. And then, rolling off a landing craft, splashing through the surf, comes a small, boxy vehicle that weighs less than a ton. It looks fragile. Almost toy-like. But it's about to change warfare forever. This is the story of every Jeep-type vehicle that rolled, roared, and fought its way through World War II. And trust me, what you're about to discover will completely change how you see the war. The word Jeep. Everyone knows it. But where did it actually come from? Some say it's from the cartoon character Eugene the Jeep. Others claim it's military slang for General Purpose Vehicle, GP, which morphed into Jeep. The truth? Nobody really knows for sure. What we do know is that by 1941, the United States desperately needed a lightweight reconnaissance vehicle. Something fast. Maneuverable. Tough as nails. And capable of going literally anywhere. The Army sent out specifications to 135 automotive companies. Only 3 responded. Bantam, Willys, and Ford. What happened next was one of the greatest engineering races in military history. Bantam came first. The Bantam reconnaissance car, also called the BRC, hit the scene in 1940. It was tiny. Scrappy. Powered by a Continental 4-cylinder engine making just 45 horsepower. But here's the thing. It worked. The Army tested it. Put it through hell. Mud. Rocks. Steep inclines. It kept going. Bantam had done it. They created the blueprint. But there was a problem. Bantam was a small company. They couldn't produce vehicles on the scale the Army needed. So the government did something controversial. They handed Bantam's designs to Willys and Ford. And told them to build their own versions. Willys struck gold. Their entry, the Willys MB, and later the refined Willys MB, became the icon. Over 360,000 Willys MB Jeeps rolled off the assembly lines during the war. What made it special? The Go Devil engine. A 2.2-liter inline-4 that produced 60 horsepower. Doesn't sound like much today, right? But back then, combined with a curb weight of just 2,300 pounds, it gave the MB an incredible power-to-weight ratio. This thing could climb a 60-degree slope. Ford a stream. Haul a machine gun and crew across a battlefield. And still come back for more. Soldiers loved it. Generals loved it. Even the enemy respected it. German officers reportedly called it the most dangerous weapon the Allies had. Not because it was armed. But because it gave American forces unmatched mobility. Ford didn't just sit around either. They produced the Ford GPW. Essentially a license-built version of the Willys MB. Over 277,000 units came out of Ford plants. The GPW was nearly identical to the MB. Same specs. Same performance. The main difference? The stamped letter F on various parts, marking it as a Ford product. Together, the Willys MB and Ford GPW became the backbone of Allied logistics. They carried supplies. Pulled artillery. Evacuated wounded soldiers. Mounted machine guns. Laid communication wire. Carried commanders to the front lines. These weren't just vehicles. They were lifelines. But America wasn't the only nation desperate for light utility vehicles. Let's cross the Atlantic. Great Britain had been at war since 1939. And they needed their own reconnaissance vehicles fast. Enter the Humber light reconnaissance car, also called the Humberette. It wasn't technically a Jeep. It had a lower profile. Armored body. And was designed more for scouting than general-purpose work. But it filled a similar role. Fast. Agile. Used for reconnaissance and liaison duties. The British also used the Willys MB under the Lend-Lease program. Thousands of American-made Jeeps flooded into Britain, North Africa, and later Europe. British soldiers nicknamed them Peeps or simply kept calling them Jeeps. They welded on extra armor, mounted Vickers machine guns, painted them in desert tan for the North African campaign. The Jeep adapted. It always did. Now let's talk about the Soviet Union. When Nazi Germany invaded in June 1941, the Red Army was caught off guard. They had light vehicles like the GAZ-64 and later the GAZ-67. These were Soviet-designed Jeeps. Boxy, rugged, built to survive the brutal Russian winters and muddy spring thaws. The GAZ-67 had a 3.3-liter engine producing 54 horsepower. Not as refined as the Willys, but tough. Brutally simple. Easy to repair with basic tools. Soviet engineers designed it that way on purpose. Over 90,000 GAZ-67s were built. But the Soviets also received thousands of American Jeeps through Lend-Lease. Willys MBs and Ford GPWs rolled into Soviet hands. Russian soldiers appreciated the American Jeeps. They were lighter, faster. But when winter hit, the GAZ models often performed better because they were designed for that climate. Germany had Jeeps too. Sort of. The Kübelwagen. Built by Volkswagen. Designed by Ferdinand Porsche himself. It wasn't four-wheel drive like the Allied Jeeps. It was rear-wheel drive. But it was lighter. And the air-cooled engine meant no radiator to freeze or puncture. Over 50,000 Kübelwagen served the Wehrmacht. German soldiers called it the Kübel. It could carry 4 men. Equipment. Weapons. It performed surprisingly well in the desert. In Russia. Even in the bocage of Normandy. But it had limits. It couldn't match the all-terrain capability of the Willys MB. And as the war dragged on, German production struggled. Resources became scarce. Quality dropped. Still, the Kübelwagen earned respect. Allied soldiers who captured them often kept using them. Japan had the Type 95 Kurigane. This was Japan's attempt at a light reconnaissance vehicle. Small. Very small. Powered by a tiny 13-horsepower engine. It looked almost comical compared to the American Jeep. But in the jungles of Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, size mattered. The Kurigane could navigate narrow jungle trails. It was simpler to ship. Easier to hide. Japan produced about 4,500 of them. Not nearly enough. Japan's industrial capacity couldn't compete with American mass production. And when American forces encountered them, they were often unimpressed. The Kurigane was slow. Underpowered. It did the job. Barely. But it highlighted the gap between Japanese and American industrial might. Italy fielded the Fiat 508 Coloniale, also called the 508 CMR. This was a militarized version of a civilian Fiat. Light. Open-topped. Used mainly in North Africa by Italian forces. It had decent speed on roads. But off-road? Not so much. Italian troops preferred captured British or American vehicles whenever possible. The 508 served its purpose early in the war. But as Italian forces faced better-equipped Allied armies, the limitations became painfully obvious. Canada contributed too. Canadian military pattern vehicles included light trucks and reconnaissance cars. Not jeeps in the traditional sense. But they filled similar roles in Canadian and Commonwealth units. Tough. Reliable. Built to Canadian specifications but influenced by American and British designs. France, before the fall in 1940, had light vehicles like the Lafley reconnaissance cars. After liberation, Free French forces used American Jeeps extensively. The French resistance fighters loved them. Easy to hide. Fast enough to escape German patrols. rugged enough to handle rough mountain roads. When France started rebuilding its military, American Jeeps became standard issue. Now here's something most people don't know. The Jeep wasn't just a combat vehicle. It became a symbol. American GIs arriving in liberated towns in Jeeps meant freedom. Hope. The end of occupation. Kids would run after them. People would cheer. The Jeep represented America's industrial power. Its ability to project force anywhere in the world. It showed that logistics wins wars. You can have the best tanks, the finest aircraft, the bravest soldiers. But if you can't move supplies, evacuate wounded, and maintain communication, you lose. After the war, Jeeps didn't disappear. They evolved. Surplus Willys MBs flooded the civilian market. Farmers bought them. Ranchers. Hunters. They became the foundation for the modern SUV industry. Willys Overland trademarked the name Jeep. Started producing civilian versions. The CJ series. Eventually, the company changed hands multiple times. Today, Jeep is a global brand. But it all started on the battlefields of World War II. Every nation that fought in that war understood the importance of mobility. The Americans mastered it with the Willys MB and Ford GPW. The Soviets adapted with the GAZ-67. The Germans made do with the Kübelwagen. The British imported what they needed. The Japanese struggled with the Kurogane. Each vehicle tells a story. Of innovation under pressure. Of engineering brilliance. Of soldiers who trusted their lives to a small, unarmored box on wheels. So the next time you see a Jeep on the road, remember where it came from. Remember the beaches of Normandy. The deserts of North Africa. The frozen steppes of Russia. The jungles of the Pacific. Remember the soldiers who drove them into hell and back. The Jeep-type vehicles of World War II weren't just machines. They were the wheels of victory. And they changed warfare forever. If you found this fascinating, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me which World War II vehicle you want covered next. Tanks? Aircraft? Maybe something more obscure? Let me know. And remember, history isn't just about the big battles. It's about the small details. The unsung heroes. The vehicles that quietly won the war. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.